Hi there, I'm Miranda Nerland, and I am a parent consultant and CMV follow-up specialist with the Early Hearing Detection and Intervention Program with the State of Florida Department of Health. Our office is a part of the Florida Newborn Screening Program, and our job is to help make sure that every newborn in our state gets the hearing testing that they need to determine their hearing level. Most children, of course, have typical hearing levels in both ears, but that is not always the case. Some children have lower levels of hearing in one or both of their ears, and so we just want every parent to know their child's hearing level so the family can make any informed decisions that they need to make about interventions. So most of you are probably aware, if you've had a child in a hospital setting, all babies usually get one of two tests. They get an OAE, which is an otoacoustic emission test, little probes in the ears, or an ABR, which is an auditory brainstem response test, and that is more like stickers on the head. Both of those things do the same thing. Those tests are given at birth to detect any hearing differences initially, and then if they don't pass those tests, then they get follow-up if necessary to confirm their hearing status. And so we definitely encourage parents to go ahead and get any follow-up testing that is recommended if they don't pass that first hearing test. And the reason is because early identification of a hearing difference is really important for sound identification and spoken language development. And so in our office, we have multiple team members who spend their days making sure that every child gets screened if possible. So that kind of follow-up includes making calls and sending letters to parents to support them while they're going through the testing process. We are helping them find doctors, find audiologists, or people who can rescreen their baby if necessary. And in some cases, we'll even help the parents make the appointment. It's that important to us that every baby gets screened. And each of our follow-up staff members is trained specifically to talk with parents about the developmental milestones that they can expect related to hearing specifically. So we try to make sure that everyone we talk with has a clear understanding of the newborn hearing screen process and why it is so important. So during that follow-up process, we actually get reports from audiologists and hospitals who are doing testing and screening to let us know whether a child has been identified with a hearing difference. We want to provide extremely timely support as soon as we get this information. And so the first way that we do that is through contact by a parent consultant. Our state is very lucky to have a program that supports two parent consultants, myself and Natasha. This is a really special role that a lot of states don't have, and we're very lucky to have two. So myself and Natasha, we both are parents of children with hearing differences, and we're the first line of support after a child is identified with a hearing difference. So within a week of identification and us getting word from the audiologist or the hospital, we try to reach out to the family so that we can kind of meet them where they are and provide the services that they really need. We both remember how it felt when our child was identified and there was no parent consultant at the EDDI program. And so we want to make sure we stand in the gap and sort of fill in for them where what they need is available. They can ask questions to a parent who has done this before and just generally be available to them as a resource. Some families need emotional support, especially right after identification, and especially if their child's hearing status was unexpected, which in most cases it is. And then sometimes this kind of support is the first step toward helping a family kind of see and understand what they need, see the future a little bit, see what's available, and then see ways in which they can support their own child. So that's the first line of defense. There are a lot of misconceptions about developmental delays related to hearing and then hearing in general. Hearing is a complicated process, but it's not one that everyone understands. We generally tend to think, oh, well, you have two ears, you hear with your ears. We actually hear with our brains. And there's so many things that have to happen in order for your ear to process and translate sound into someone's voice or into music. And so parent education is also very important to everyone at all of the levels in the follow-up process. because it's our best chance to help parents understand how hearing works, how amplification works in children with hearing differences, that is cochlear implants, hearing aids, and BAHAs, and then how early intervention can help kids overcome any delays that might be related to a hearing difference. So the very first call, and then on into every call after that, including calls by the parent consultants to parents of kids who have definitely been identified with hearing loss or hearing difference. Every one of those calls is an opportunity for us to kind of address also some of those misconceptions about hearing loss right from the beginning. For example, we get a lot of things all the time, but one of the things we often hear is, "Oh, I know my baby can hear, and I know they failed the hearing test, but he just has fluid in his ears." That is not necessarily untrue. Failed hearing tests can definitely mean that. And that is a really common response to pediatricians who are faced with a child in their office who's not passing the screen. They don't want to alarm a parent, and so they give them that information. And that is sometimes certainly true. Sometimes a baby will fail a test because they were moving around too much. Those are all possibilities, but they're not always true. And we don't ever want a parent to make an assumption that leads to a late diagnosis of a more permanent hearing difference, because early intervention is key, particularly for hearing. Sometimes people believe that you're either deaf or you're hearing, or that being hard of hearing is only something that more elderly individuals have to deal with. And the reality is that there's a wide range of hearing levels and ability to process sound, and there are really supports available for every single person at every single level. So all the way from the brand newest newborn up to a child who gets late identified at 6 or 7 years old, we have a lot of options for those folks. We just have to get to them. We have to get the information to us so that we can reach out to their families. Another one that we hear, and that is of particular, it's a heart place for my colleague because this is her lived experience, is that unilateral loss is no big deal. Let's loss in one ear but not the other. It's enough to have one good ear. That's a really common misconception about hearing. Yes, children with hearing on one side may be able to learn language and they'll probably be able to speak, but it's not always easy to hear with only one working ear, particularly in loud situations. Imagine one of your ears being closed off in a loud classroom or a loud restaurant. And in fact, children with unilateral loss are 10 times more likely to fail a grade. So we take that population extremely seriously because we definitely want to make sure that in those instances, parents are educated right from the beginning so they can themselves start to see some of the holes in these misconceptions and advocate for their child appropriately. And then one more misconception that I definitely wanted to address is that a child's hearing status will always remain the same. Even if your child passes the newborn screen and has a normal hearing status, it's still a really good idea to be aware of how they're hearing and how they're responding, because late onset hearing loss is also a possibility. Some children can develop a hearing loss later on after a virus. We've spoken to many families whose children have had meningitis or have had cytomegalovirus and have later on been diagnosed with a hearing difference even after passing the newborn screen. There also are genetic reasons that would not be tested in the beginning if a child passes a screen, but can lead to late onset hearing loss. And those things are just not apparent at birth. So we are also educating families, especially families who seem a little bit hesitant to go through the follow-up testing. Yes, this is your choice. Absolutely, you don't have to get your child tested. However, we would love for you to just keep an eye. Just keep an eye out and make sure that you're watching for the things that are generally good milestones for hearing. Like I said, throughout the screening process, we're speaking to parents about milestones, and we are heavily putting weight on the importance of getting screened so that they know their baby can hear all the speech sounds. That's really the language that we try to use to make sure that parents understand the gravity of and the necessity of getting hearing testing. It's really not enough for a baby to turn their head when someone comes into the room or calls their name, because like I said, hearing is a very complex process, and testing is the only way to know that a child is hearing all of the different sounds at all of the different levels to develop good spoken language skills. So for example, a child with a mild high frequency loss might turn their head when a person calls their name, but they could be missing the S and F sounds. And imagine how hard it would be to learn language if you were impacted just by missing a few consonants or a few sounds. A child might even be able to hear and understand most of the conversations around them, but they might also be missing bird singing or whispering or music. And we don't want our kids to miss anything. And so if that's the case, you won't be able to tell that without appropriate testing. So we're always telling parents, watch and see, but also listen to the doctors, listen to the folks that are asking you to get that testing. And certainly, if you don't remember anything at all about this presentation, remember this. If a parent has concerns about their baby's speech and language development, or the child does not appear to be responding to sounds normally or developing language normally, a hearing difference could be the cause. It used to be standard practice that children who perhaps were not responding verbally, they were not developing language quickly, they would always get a hearing test. That has not been as common because there are other lines of defense and there are other reasons now that we are more aware of, some neurodivergent reasons, why a child might not speak. And sometimes those are the very first thing that people will go to and test for. And it has absolutely happened that a child will be tested for autism or tested for some other neurodivergence. And later down the road, they realize, oh, it just couldn't hear. So that's an easy test. And there are tons of interventions available. So definitely go there first. And we know that parents are great observers of their children, especially in the first few months. They're there, they're not up and around and walking. We're all staring into our baby's new face. So if a parent notices that their child is not turning to sounds, they're not engaging with loud toys, engaging with their siblings who can be loud or other family members, we would definitely encourage them to let their pediatrician know and have them specifically ask for a referral for a hearing test, just to be absolutely sure. Because like I said, late onset hearing loss is also a real thing that we contend with. So when it comes to hearing loss, the most important thing a parent can do, the most important role that they can play initially is to just get the testing. Because we don't want to put too much emphasis on a parent watching and figuring out whether their child is responding or not, because it's kind of a losing battle. You can't tell if your child responds to their name, whether or not they're hearing the S sound. It's just, and that's not a parent's fault. Hearing is something that we also often take for granted in our children. They've got 2 ears, you can see their 2 ears, and we do take for granted that they are hearing. So it's easy to make assumptions about a person's hearing level based on the things that we're seeing. So it's important, like I said, to trust the screeners and the doctors who want to do the testing to be sure. And one thing that we try to put a heavy focus on is encouraging parents to take their child to all the scheduled follow-up appointments until they get an answer. Sometimes a child will get an answer very early on in the process because their hearing level is very evident. And for some kids, it takes a little bit longer. For some children who have hearing, but they have auditory processing disorders, those sorts of things can take longer. And sometimes parents can flag. It can be a lot of appointments and their stamina. They get tired of going to the appointments and paying for the appointments, but we really want to make sure that they're getting a good answer. And the reason is because the earlier a child is identified with a hearing difference at any level, the better, because there are a lot of interventions available. Children can take advantage of hearing aids or even cochlear implants if that's necessary, and those fill in the gaps where a child is missing a sound. It's not necessarily just like the hearing aids that your grandma or grandpa wear that make things louder. Children's hearing aids, pediatric hearing aids, are very specialized for each individual person who uses them based on their particular hearing difference. And the earlier a child begins listening with amplification, the better chance they have of developing spoken language. And then children with hearing loss at all levels, whether they are amplified or not, can take advantage of speech therapy services that help them learn to listen and learn to use spoken language. Now, spoken language is not the only thing that's available. Some families choose not to use amplification, which is a perfectly fine and valid choice. And our office is 100% non-biased in the choices that a family wants to make regarding their child's hearing. If they choose American Sign Language as their primary form of communication, they're going to want to start teaching that language as soon as possible, right away, just like hearing children begin to learn their language at home right away. They don't know they need ASL until they know that they have a hearing difference. And these services are really only available after a child's hearing status is confirmed. And that really can only be done through testing. You will definitely see some little bit more old school pediatricians, or even just people in the community, clapping, snapping, calling a child's name, saying, oh, yep, it's good, they turn, they can hear. Those are all good ways to determine if someone has some hearing. But the only way to know if they can hear F, S, and H is through testing. And we definitely want our kids to hear F, S, and H, and birds and music and all of the things. Now, I will say this, it's a really good time in Florida for hearing services. We're in a really good place, and we have a lot of intervention services available for children with hearing differences. And accessing these services early makes a huge difference. One recent study indicated that children with a hearing difference who receive any amount of early intervention services within the first year were twice as likely to be kindergarten ready on time. And in that study, the interesting thing was that the intensity of the services did not affect readiness as much as early intervention. It didn't matter whether a child received services once a week or multiple times a week. It really mattered whether they started getting early intervention regularly before their first birthday. So again, getting services early is absolutely key. So what does that look like for a child with a hearing difference? First of all, every baby with a hearing difference automatically qualifies for early intervention through Early Steps, which is Florida's early intervention provider. Hearing loss is an established condition. And so if your baby has a hearing difference, they will qualify for Early Steps. We actually send those referrals ourselves to be absolutely certain that everybody gets enrolled. They provide in-home therapy and periodic assessments to track a baby's development up to age 3 to see if they're meeting their milestones. And so for hearing differences or hearing related milestones. But we also offer just a multitude of services for families who have kids at all different points in the journey, not only for newborns, but for kids who are a little bit older. It's, like I said, a really good time for services in Florida for kids with a hearing difference. So in addition to the parent consultants, myself and Natasha, our program supports an initiative called the PEP program. This is the Parent Empowerment Program. And this program puts families in touch with parent leaders who are parents like us of kids with hearing difference, but those folks are more local to each individual family. And so they are also parents of children who are deaf and hard of hearing, but they know the services that are available in their area and also other people who are in their area. And those parents are also specially trained to help parents navigate the emotions and the questions and some of the logistics of parenting a deaf or hard of hearing child. It does look a little bit different. We also have the Parent Infant Program, which is available through the Florida School for the Deaf and the Blind. And that program offers services, family support services, deaf mentor services, and community events. And the child can be enrolled in that program until their 6th birthday. And then parent advisors are going to share knowledge about all of the different communication methods and help children and families develop skills in whatever method they choose. So regardless of whether they choose spoken language or they choose a manual American Sign Language, if they choose cued speech, anything, they will be able to give the parents what they need to develop those language skills with their kids early. And our state offers a lot of services based on communication style because that is very personal to each family. So for families of children who choose amplification, so they choose hearing aids or cochlear implants, and they decide to pursue spoken language, they can access services like telehealth visits. It's called the T-Visit program at the Clark School. That's in Jacksonville. And then the Debbie School is in Miami, but a lot of them will provide teleservices for people statewide. And then we also have the Deaf Kids Can program, and that also offers statewide services for kids who have families who've chosen spoken language. Children who identify as deafblind, like my daughter, can take advantage of the vision services available through the parent-infant program at the School for the Deaf and the Blind. And they can also enroll and take advantage of services in the Florida and Virgin Islands Deafblind Collaborative. And that collaborative will follow a deafblind child until they're 21. So that's a lifetime of services available for kids with deafblindness in Florida. And then Natasha and I provide online resources for families who are specifically choosing American Sign Language, and then we'll direct them to our Florida chapter of Hands and Voices, and then back again to the School for the Deaf and the Blind if they want hands-on training and practice. That is a foreign language, and the family has to commit to learning it, but it is a lovely and valid choice, and we want to make sure that people know it's available and there are ways for them to learn it, both online and then also in person. And then finally, for families who need to pay for hearing aids, which is a big hot topic issue, Florida just started the Children's Hearing Aid Program. This financially supports kids aged 0 to 18 who need hearing aids and assistive listening devices. And then Early Steps also is sometimes able to help financially assist parents who need to purchase hearing aids and who have kids who are 0 to 3. So we're in a good place. Florida is a good place to be. And if your child is identified with a hearing difference, we have all of the things available, and probably more things than you ever would have imagined were available. So I really hope that this was informative and helpful presentation that described the way that Florida supports children all the way from newborn hearing screening and then beyond, all the way to identification and after. Hearing is our passion, and making sure that everyone that we reach has a clear picture of how the human ear and brain hears and all the different things that are available for people in our state who don't hear or who just hear a little bit differently. So thank you.